All right, so having gone over all of that, I want to now come back and talk about the anatomy of some of the pieces that don't fit neatly into that main cycle where we talked about the ovary and the uterus. First, I want to talk about the vagina. So the vagina is right down here at the base of the uterus, and of course also exits the body between the labia minora. Now, the vagina is important both for sexual intercourse. This is where the penis enters, where sperm is deposited. It's also the birth canal through which the baby would be pushed during actual labor. We can see that exit here in the external genitalia. There is a muscular wall around the vagina involved both in intercourse and in the labor and pushing. And then, in addition, on the external genitalia, we're going to come back, we can see this glans clitoris. So remember, when I talked about development, I said that the glans clitoris is equivalent to the glans penis, and that the shaft of the penis, the erectile tissue that is inside there, is the internal clitoris. So the internal clitoris is much larger than the external visible clitoris, and in fact wraps around the vaginal canal. And in fact, generally it is thought at this point that most female sexual stimulation during intercourse actually comes from the internal clitoris that wraps around, and this is erectile tissue. So during arousal, it will become erect and swell with blood and wrap more tightly around that vaginal canal. Now, in addition to the genitalia and everything we've talked about there's also mammary glands. So we'll talk again about milk production a little bit more when we talk about pregnancy and how that sort of buildup happens, but it's important to talk a little about the structure of mammary glands and what we're looking at here. So mammary glands are actually modified sweat glands, the same sweat glands that you have under your armpit. These are modified from that. And in fact, in some primitive mammals, the milk is just secreted through pores onto the skin, just like sweat. In most mammals, however, we see these nipples and the milk is secreted into the nipple. Now, in a prepubertal female, there are some pre-development glands, but they're present, but they don't develop. You also find some of these in a prepubertal male. Now, during puberty, these milk glands will develop and fat padding will develop around them, which can then be converted into the nutrients for milk during actual milk production. So this provides a store against famine or difficulty finding food during that time. During pregnancy, these will build up and get larger and swell up to be ready to produce milk. So, I already talked about that. So the other thing I'm showing here is just back to that oocyte. So oocyte at ovulation, you can see the final, you still got set up, you've still got that 2N ready for that final division. So the other thing I want to touch on is the case study that you've been working on. So the case study is due presumably, Wednesday night, so hopefully you're watching this on Wednesday, but what I really want you to be thinking about as you're working on that case study is, what does this mean at a broader scale? We're looking at reproductive development, but we're looking at an unusual case. But one thing that's interesting about this case study is there's sort of this is different than a lot of the case studies. This isn't a person who needs any intervention to be able to live a normal life. This is someone who has a functioning body, but it's just not quite the body we expect it to be. So as you're doing this, I want you to really think, if we were doing this in class, I would have a whole discussion about what biological sex is and the complexities of it, but I really want you to be ready and thinking about that. What does it mean for someone to be male? What does it mean for someone to be female? What does it mean for someone to be intersex? And look at that as you're looking at this developmental process.